All right, so next up, we're gonna add a second kettlebell. So for Jace, as I kept calling him in the squat module, big strong boy. So 20 kilos per side is gonna be okay for him. You'll notice we've got the plate set up there already. We're gonna move to that shortly, but nice. This is a pretty good height, really, to start with the kettlebells, being similar to what a bar will be if you've got these full-size kettlebells. You may need to consider, it's gonna be awkward, but with like steps or something like that, if you have to use dumbbells or whatever to make this work in your gym. So you can get Jason set up in a more traditional, conventional stance, so about hip width. So he's got the kettlebells sitting there, exactly the same pattern as what we did last time. So I'm gonna get him to set from the top again. So those shoulders drive down, ribs drive down, hinge back, knees come last. We've got a straight line to shoulder to the kettlebells. He's pulled tight. All of this is braced, pushing the floor down, pushing the chest up, hinging back, getting down to the floor. Obviously the biggest risk here is crushing your little toe. So it does add a definite challenge there to stabilize that weight, which is actually a great thing to try and build stability before we get onto a barbell. We talked a lot about during the squat how we want to create subjectively difficult movements while being objectively easy in case we get things wrong. So if Jace was to round his back and do like a not a very good rep here, I'm not going to encourage him to do it. He's still going to be safe because it's only 40 kilos. If we use client, we would say, like, let's say we're starting with 12 kilo kettlebells, like they're not going to necessarily get hurt if they mess this up, and you can work on the form and get things right. Teach that lat down, teach the rib cage down, teach push from the floor so we're not jerking on things. We're building that tension in. So Jace is already tight in the lat. He's got the kettlebell tight in his hand before he moves, then pressing the floor out. So all of these skills are going to play a large role in when we actually get to the barbell deadlift later on. So Jace, just spin around for me. I'm going to get just your big toe to hang off that plate. We'll slide these in. So we're still looking for that same position in terms of having the shoulder over top of the middle of the kettlebell. So we want to position them so that's possible. Yep, so we set the lats, we set the ribs, drive back with the hinge. Very nice. So we see just by adding the step that we actually get a much greater hinge moment. So the distance between the shoulder and the hip is greater, which means we're getting more work now into the hamstrings and glutes. We're getting more challenge of stability through the hip as we still have these kettlebells outside our base of support, which is great. If I get close enough with the mic, you'll hear that Jace is actually having to really brace now and actually do some work to drive this weight. We're starting, for Jace now, starting to get into that subjectively difficult while it's an objectively easy weight. It's really nice. So same rules apply as before. Ribs, we don't want to, one of the most common things we'll see, particularly with females, but anyone who's mobile really, we're going to go into this extension pattern. So we're trying to pull here and extend. I can't even actually do it because I don't have the range, but tip this like anterior tilt, getting this excessive lumbar curve, and then trying to load through that. It's obviously not what we want. So driving the ribs down, getting this brace. As we progress on and thinking about like getting a breath in here, think about if we're extending, we're actually increasing the space that we have the air in versus compressing that air. Think about a balloon that's half deflated is really squishy, whereas a balloon that's like tight full of air is quite strong. So we want to really lock that in. Do you have anything to add on those, how they felt?
The deficit's a really good, subjectively difficult exercise, which even for someone who's really, really strong, probably a good way to warm up. I think that like there are more moving parts to this, but because the weight is less, you're not going to fatigue yourself to the point where it's going to carry over to your working sets. You get proficient in this movement, adding a barbell, it's actually subtracting two different things and bringing it to one. So you're going to be a much better lifter, getting this right, moving to a barbell.
Yeah, it's we talk about, and we'll talk about this in the more advanced modules, but sometimes like actually deliberately putting yourself in compromised positions to allow when things go wrong, when things get heavy. This is one of those things where you've got a deficit, you're outside of your normal position, weights outside of base of support, really challenging that stability and just bulletproofing yourself a little bit before we get onto the bar. So again, we want to less importance, I guess, on weight is what we talked about with the squat in terms of like exact weights that you need to achieve to move on. You could still probably look at 50% of body weight at a kettlebell deficit. Would be a great starting point to go, all right, I'm happy to put you on a barbell now. We just have more options with a deadlift, which we're going to jump into now, that you could probably progress things a little bit quicker. What I'm really looking for is the ability to hold that, we talked about reference lines. So the main reference line here is, can we hold the hip to shoulder line strong through the entire pattern, both on the way up and on the way down, and stabilize all of that. So that means we've learnt how basically we can brace the ribs down, we can keep the lats active and hold that all stable and then produce force from our legs. If we can do that, then I'm comfortable to move to the next exercise. So you're maxing out the kettlebells you have available for your single, maxing out your kettlebells for your regular double kettlebell, then move to the deficit, max out your kettlebells again. Sweet, let's move. Maybe what we're gonna do next is a raised trap bar.